All right, hello and welcome to my mathematical model. So for this assignment, I went ahead and made a calculator for Noita's very cryptic wand system. So, what is Noita? In case you're not familiar, Noita is a roguelike where you build your own weapons out of spells. So, what's interesting about this is it runs on its own engine. It's a 2D game, a 2D roguelike, running in what's called the Falling Sand engine. So every pixel is simulated in this engine. So sand falls, water flows, fire spreads, large ice structures and rock will crack when force is applied to them. It's pretty sweet. You descend through a series of biomes, each one getting progressively more difficult. Death sends you back to the start. Pretty standard stuff. What is not standard is along the way you find wands and spells, which are each randomly generated, and you build your own weapons. So wands are essentially empty containers, and spells are what goes into them. Noita intentionally does not explain any of this to you because they want to make you figure it out, but nonetheless it's super confusing. So, how a wand works. Think of it like an empty function, and the spells are essentially the code in the body of the function. So, the spells are loaded sequentially left to right. They fire one after the other. And at the end of this loop, you incur a recharge penalty, in which you have to wait for that cooldown before you can start the loop again. Some vocab we'll be using here. Slots are how many spells the wand holds. Cast delay is the pause between one spell and the next. Recharge is the longer pause after the last spell fires before it loops back. And mana is a pool that every spell spends, which refills on its own over time. So this is what the wand screen looks like. It's a whole bunch of numbers, and none of these tell you how much damage it does, how fast it shoots. Really, I mean, there's a cast delay, but you still don't know how fast it's going to shoot because in this game there are two binding currencies essentially that are in tension with each other here. So there's your recharge and cast delay, and there's your mana cost. And if one runs out before the other, that is the one that is going to bind you from firing again. So cast delay here reads 0.07 seconds. The engine's storing it in ticks. 4 ticks divided by 60 frames per second is what we run this game at. 0.0667. They round it up. This is important for later. Recharge reads 0.4 seconds. That's 24 ticks. It's substantially longer than a cast delay. So which one of these stats matter the most? All right. Well, the answer, of course, is that it depends. And nothing on the screen will tell you what it depends on. So that makes it very, very difficult to compare two wands to each other because you don't really know which one's better for the composition of spells that you're trying to use. So you kind of have to become just hyper proficient at it all on your own. But what if you didn't have to? What if there was an answer to that? Well, lucky everyone, there is now. The Noita wand calculator. So I scraped all this information basically from my local copy of Noita. There's 392 spells. They all have data attached to them. Mana cost, cast delay, recharge, damage, price, spawn tiers. Price and spawn tiers, not important for our purposes here. So essentially for this calculator, we will give it a wand and its stats, and we'll give it a set of spells, and it'll return to us the cycle length, the shots, the damage per second, and which of the two limits is actually holding the wand back. So our testing methodology here is we're going to use two almost identical wands, except for one thing, which is how many spells fire at once, or its multicast stat. So both wands are going to be non-shuffling. 300 mana in the pool, 100 mana recharge, 5 slots, 2-second reload, 0.5 second delay, 5 spark bolts for each of them. Wand 1 is going to be a multicast 1, so 5 shots, half a second apart, and then a 2-second pause. Wand 2 is going to be multicast 5, so it shoots all 5 spells at once, and then a 2-second pause. So it's the same spells, the same delays, the same reload. Multicast is not a damage stat. but it more than doubles the output, simply because of the way that wands are built in Noita. So here's what the wand screen will not tell you before we get into the calculator. So essentially, multicast is really great. It doesn't affect its damage, and it doesn't really, I guess it does affect its speed because it fires all at once, but it doesn't really affect like any of the actual stats. It just batches them all into one shot. So it doubles the output, more than doubles the output. Also because of the way that the wand stats are derived from ticks, it moves in steps because because it's rounded. You have to clear essentially that barrier before you'll change anything. And of course, with multicast 5, for the number's sake, cast time will be 0 because they fire all at once, so there's no gaps left. So the only cycle you have to deal with is the reload penalty. So why is this helpful? Well, a wand will stop firing for 2 reasons: the cooldown or running out of mana. Whichever comes first is your limit. So, like, this is a illustration of 2 wands with the same mana income but different fire rates, and one is being bound by the mana pool and the other is being bound by its cooldown. So those are some limitations, but let's go ahead and get into the calculator. So the Noita wand calculator. So in this block right here, we will see some blue fields here with the yellow background. These are our inputs, and everything else will be derived from those inputs. So cast delay here and recharge are measured in frames. Then we have our mana pool, our mana charge speed, our spell capacity, and how many spells will fire per cast. And then down here in our settings, we have our frames per second. We have our measure window, and this will be important later. Over here, we have our loadout. So this is, remember from our spell screen, essentially our model of the wand. So here we have our spell slots up to a max of 12, and we have the spells in those slots. So for our purposes, we have 5 spark bolts, but if you wanted to make it a different spell, you could use this handy dandy drop down, and you will see every spell in the game ripped right from their own files. So you could choose here or type it. You'll see, and then some data attached to these spells. So right here, this is an interesting one, block. So because this is a multicast wand that fires 5 spells at once, you'll see that these all say block 1 next to them. If we were to change this to a wand that fires 1 spell at once, we will see that the block then counts up sequentially to 5. This is kind of interesting because essentially you're able to optimize your wands, and I find this really interesting because it's similar to a Handheld project, the Spatial File Explorer, and that thing had so many nodes for your file tree that it could not possibly display them all, even on flat screen, but it had to run in VR. So I ended up batching all of those, and I could do thousands and thousands of them at once and run in VR. So this is kind of the same optimization here, happening emergently through Noita's wand system. So because this fires 5 spells at once, or 1 spell at once, you'll see that we change our block here, which is going to have big ramifications for the output of this wand. And then over here we can see some frame data for our blocks that are derived. Over here we'll see the cycle information here. So this is the cast time in frames, the recharge in frames, and then our full cycle length in both frames and seconds, as well as some additional information derived from here. So I mentioned this earlier in the PowerPoint, cast time for a batch wand like this is going to come out to 0 because the only penalty you incur is recharge. But if we set that to 1, you'll then see that we incur the cost of each spell's spell delay. And over here in the output, we can see essentially what this all kind of comes out to. So we have here our damage per second with a cast delay ceiling, assuming that mana is free, and then a damage per second with the mana ceiling, assuming cast delay is free. And this kind of abstraction essentially catches which one of those is going to stop you, right? Because that's really what in-game stops you from firing anymore. So for this wand, we obviously see that cast delay is our binding constraint here. For both of them, they will be, but it changes as spell loadouts kind of get mixed up. So we see we have our sustained DPS of 3.6, and we'll have 25 shots in this window of 20 seconds. But you do not have to take my word for it, because we're going to test it right here. Alrighty, so we got our handy dandy little timer right here, and we have a copy of Noita running. So in here we have our two wands set up already, and these are the same parameters as the model. So you'll see that these are identical in every way, except for bells per cast. This one will fire 1 per cast, and this one will fire all 5 per cast, and that's the difference between these two. So for our model, for our 1 per cast, it predicts that in 20 seconds we will have 25 shots. So let's test that out. So we're going to make this timer run to 10 seconds, and then we'll just hold the left mouse button. And let it hit 30, that'll be a 20-second window, and we'll count in seconds. So 5, 10, 15, 20, 25. So that was indeed correct. 25 shots in the window. Let's test it with our multicast. Over here, we'll do the same thing. We'll go to 10. And then just hold the mouse button. 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50, 55, 30 seconds. And if we switch this to 5 spells per cast, we will see that was indeed predicted by the calculator. So pretty fun little tool. Also want to show this off. This is a little visualizer for that same thing, basically. So it'll take our data, and then if we run it right here, it'll go ahead and kind of show us our cycle state and our mana state as the full frame times for the loop kind of runs. So you can kind of see that before without going in, which is pretty cool. And here we have, this is just our data that we ripped from the game, all the spells, all their data that's attached to them. This is a fun little economy here. And that is pretty much it. So this has been the Noita wand calculator, and I hope you enjoyed. Thank you.